So hello everyone, and thanks for joining this webinar about DORA. So let's wait maybe 30 seconds for everyone to join. While we are waiting, just a couple of notes. So we are going to record this webinar, and you'll be able to watch this webinar for basically the same page where you registered for this webinar. So if you joined through YouTube or through LinkedIn, simply on the same page where you're actually watching the webinar now, you will see also the recording. If you registered through Advisera website, you will actually receive an email with the recording to the link. And we'll also, you'll be able to download this presentation deck, and after the webinar, I'll explain exactly how to download this presentation deck. So if you are able to participate until the end of the webinar, you'll hear how you can do this. Okay, so let's start with the webinar. So welcome to this webinar called What is DORA and How to Comply with It. My name is Dejan Kosutic, and I'm the main ISO 27001 NIS2 and DORA expert at Advisera. Advisera is a company that makes compliance easy to understand and simple to use. This webinar today is streamed through Zoom, also through LinkedIn and through YouTube Live, and it will last approximately 50 to 60 minutes depending on the number of questions you'll have. And I'll try to make it as interactive as possible so that you can ask any questions that you're interested in. And by all means, please do ask all the questions even before the Q&A session, which will, by the way, be at the end of the webinar. So you can ask any questions even during the webinar, and I'll try to answer your questions as you send them. Okay, good. Now let's basically move on to the next slide. Why is DORA important? Well, DORA is important because it comes into effect in 2 days, right? So on January 17th, it will become effective in the whole European Union, and it will apply to all, I would say, to almost all financial organizations in Europe. I have a separate slide, and I'll explain these things there. But basically, it's I would say, the biggest cybersecurity regulation so far when it comes to financial sector. So what I'll explain during the webinar is who needs to comply, and also what are the key steps that you need to do for the implementation. I'll also show you a couple of examples of documents that you can use to comply with DORA, and I'll basically cover all of these things. And this webinar is basically intended not only for financial organizations that need to comply with DORA, but also for their IT suppliers, because as you will see during the presentation, DORA has also some requirements with regards to IT suppliers, and I'll cover these as well. So one of the, I would say, main thoughts really today is, as I already mentioned, is that that DORA is, I would say, very comprehensive, but it's also very prescriptive. So unlike, let's say, NIS2, which is a European directive for cybersecurity, unlike ISO 27001, which is a cybersecurity standard, DORA is much more prescriptive. It goes into much more detail on what needs to be implemented and how, and this is what it, I would say, makes it very different from the first two that I mentioned. And I'll show you some examples of these requirements, and I'll give you some tips on how to comply with them during the webinar today. Okay, great. Now let's move on to the agenda. First, I'll go through this agenda, but let me know through chat which of these topics you find the most interesting. So this will give me any idea on which topics I should focus on during the presentation. So as I go through these topics, feel free to let me know through chat if you prefer anything of this for me to focus on. So let me just open the chat window. Okay, I think I see everything here. Good. Okay, so of course the first topic will be some basics about DORA, but this will be, I would say, rather short. Then I'll go through which financial organizations need to comply. Then I'll show you these steps that you need to do to comply with DORA. And also I'll go through the point of which ICT suppliers, by the way, ICT stands for Information and Communication Technology, so basically this is IT, so which IT suppliers need to comply with DORA, and if you can use ISO 27001 for DORA compliance. I've made, I would say, a small mapping of this cybersecurity standard with DORA, and of course we'll go through some Q&As. Okay, good. So let's start further. So basically, just a couple of topics, a couple of basic facts. So DORA was actually published almost well 2 and something years ago in 2022, but it's valid actually from January this year. What I didn't really write here, it's applicable only for EU countries, or to be more precise, for financial organizations in European Union. So it's not applicable, or at least not directly applicable, to financial organizations which are outside of European Union, nor to, let's say, IT companies which are, let's say, outside of European Union. However, if let's say a financial, let's say if a bank in UK has their subsidiary in, let's say, Germany in European Union, then this subsidiary of this UK bank needs to be compliant as well. So basically, any financial organization that operates within European Union, no matter where their headquarters are, then these entities which are within European Union must be compliant. Now, the most important chapters in DORA are these chapters 2 to 5. So let me switch the screen now and show you how these chapters look like. Just give me a second. Okay, I'm showing you now this full text of DORA regulation. By the way, you can see this. We'll send you now the link to this full text, so that you can, when you click this link, you will be able to open and see for yourself. And by the way, if you joined this webinar through LinkedIn, then for some reasons, because of LinkedIn, you can't really click these links that you will see in the chat window. In this case, you simply copy this URL and then paste it into a browser, and you will see, you'll be able to open this link as well. So in any case, feel free to open this link so that you can actually see this full text of DORA. Anyway, what I wanted to show you is that these chapters 2 to 5 are the most important for financial entities that need to comply. So you can see actually here, this chapter 2 is about ICT risk management. So when I click on it, you will see all the articles that are relevant in chapter 2. When I click chapter 3, then it shows all the articles related to article 17 to 23 related to ICT incident management. Chapter 4 is about digital operational resilience testing, and chapter 5 is around managing of ICT third-party risk. So basically, this is what the requirements, I mean, this is how the structure of the DORA looks like. And when you click any of these articles, for example, this article 5 about governance, then you will see the full text of this article. As you will see, when you read it, here you actually have the definition of what the management bodies have to define, what have to oversee, and so on. As you can see, there is much more text than, for example, than you would see in NIS2 or ISO 27001. So again, this regulation is much more detailed, much more prescriptive than NIS2. If you go for Article 6, ICT Risk Management Framework, again, you see quite a lot of text here with pretty precise, I would say, requirements. Okay, good. Now, we'll also share with you this, okay, let me go actually back to my presentation. When you think about, when you read this regulation, you will see that it's focused on cybersecurity, of course. It's also focused on resilience. Basically, you can interpret this as a business continuity, and it's also focused a lot on this supply chain risk. So basically risk of these IT or ICT suppliers. Now, what you have to bear in mind is that DORA is basically not alone. There are these Commission delegated regulations, and there is also this one Commission implementing regulations. So you can consider these other documents as kind of appendices to DORA, and then which prescribe into more detail the specific requirements when it comes to cybersecurity, resilience, and so on. So let me actually show you this. You can see this on this page, which is called Where to Start with DORA. So this is the page on Advisera website, and we'll share you now the link also to this page Where to Start. Anyway, when you scroll down, you will see, first of all, this full text of DORA regulation that I already shown you, but you will also see these other Commission delegated regulations. So CDR 2024-1502, this is basically about, this regulation specifies, how these IT suppliers are classified as critical. 1772 speaks about how you classify ICT incidents. This 1773 is the one that defines what are the contractual requirements for IT suppliers. 1774 is the biggest one, and it focuses on basically cybersecurity measures. So whatever is written in DORA, you have at least 2 or 3 times the text in this 1774 regulation. And then there is this Commission implementation regulation, which is called Templates for Register of Information for Contractual Arrangements. Basically, it specifies how you need to create this register of suppliers. So as you can see, besides DORA, you also have to read these other regulations, these other appendices, so to say, and yeah, there is a lot to read. It's something that really takes a lot of time to go through all of this. Anyway, I'm not going to open these other CDRs now because it would take too much time, but you have the link, so you can go and take a look at all of these yourself. Okay, good. Now let me go on back to my presentation. Another thing to mention here is that since this is a regulation, I mean DORA is a regulation, there is no transposition to EU countries. So basically this DORA is directly applicable to all the financial organizations directly without any publishing of any local laws of European countries. And there is also this difference, this is the difference between DORA and NIS2, because NIS2 is a directive, it's not directly applicable to critical infrastructure companies. So basically, based on NIS2, EU countries have to publish their own laws. This is not the case with DORA, so DORA is directly applicable, very much similar to GDPR. Okay, now, which financial organizations have to comply? Almost the whole financial sector in European Union. Let me actually show again the screen, and it's easy to see from the text. Okay, let's go here, and let's go for Article Article 2. So here in Article 2 you actually have the specification that, okay, it applies to all credit institutions, payment institutions, account information service providers, electronic money institution, investment firms, and so on and so forth. As you can see, there is a lot here. There are, almost 20 items listed here. So, you can take a look when you have time, but almost the whole sector is covered. Okay, going back to my presentation, there are some exceptions. For example, leasing companies are not covered, small insurance companies, special organizations, according to decisions of EU member states, these would be like export banks, these kind of things. But other than these exceptions, all other financial organizations are covered. Now, what is kind of additional complication here with DORA is that there are actually different requirements for, let's say, normal financial entities versus smaller financial entities versus micro financial entities. So actually the requirements are not quite the same. Now I'll share actually the screen again with another document here. And by the way, I will share now with you this article called "Who Must Comply with DORA Regulation." So you'll see this article, which will also tell you more about, if you want to read, more about who needs to comply. You can take a look at this article. Anyway, let me show this article, which speaks about these micro and small and normal financial organizations. So there's this article about which lists all the documents that are required by DORA regulation. But what is good is here that you have this table in this. Let me get rid of this ad. Let me get rid of this here. There is this table which basically lists all the requirements from DORA in this first column. And then you have the references. It refers directly to the specific DORA article. And then it says which financial entities must comply, right? So there's this article, set clear roles and responsibilities for all ICT related functions. It's specified in Article 5.2c. And when you click this link, it will go directly to this article, so it's easy to cross-reference. Anyway, but this is applicable to all financial organizations except smaller ones, right? Now you see this asterisk here, and then basically it specifies what are these smaller financial organizations, and here you actually have the explanation what these smaller are. So basically, it doesn't apply this 5.2c doesn't apply to all of them. It applies only to these normal, I would say, financial organizations, right? Here you also have the, let's say, explanation on how you need to implement this, but this is not the point now. Let's scroll down through this table. You have to click this show all documents. So for example here, establish a role to monitor and so on and so forth. So this is 5.3. And this is valid for all except smaller and micro enterprises, right? So again, it's not directly applicable to all financial organizations. There are some exceptions. And when you scroll up, you will again see the explanation of what are micro enterprises. This is listed here. Okay, in any case, we'll send you now this, you already see this link to this article, which list of documents required by DORA regulation, but it's actually helpful because you see all these requirements and the specification and the difference between these normal and micro and small financial organizations. Good, now let's move on with my presentation. Yeah, now let's go for these compliance steps. So what exactly do you have to do to comply with DORA? First of all, it's good if you perform this gap analysis just to see, how far are you from being compliant with this regulation. And then once you have these gaps, then you can actually move on and go with the other steps, having a much better idea on what you have to do. And by the way, we are working now on publishing a gap analysis tool, which will help you, determine how compliant, how much are you compliant with DORA. We already developed this tool for ISO 27001 and for NIS2. And actually, I'll ask my colleague to share now these links for NIS2 gap analysis and for ISO 27001 gap analysis, just to get an idea how this looks like. But in any case, we will publish very soon also the gap analysis for DORA. Yeah, okay, you can see actually now the link for this NIS2 gap analysis. Good. Now let's, so the second step is basically to go for this, to obtain the support from senior management. Because it's a pretty big project. It takes quite a lot of time, and basically you have to get enough resources, enough time, and this is something that you will simply need to use. You will need this for such a complex project. The next step is to go and set up project management. This is where you define the project manager, the milestones, the sponsor, all these kind of things. And then you should perform some kind of an internal training, at least for the project team, so that everyone knows exactly what to do. And by the way, there is an article on our website which explains these 18 steps, and we'll share now with this link to this article, which explains all of these steps in a bit more detail. Okay, good. Now let's move on with the next, with the fifth step. Basically, the fifth step is to define this governance and senior management role. So you have to define exactly what this, how actually the senior management controls what happens with resilience, with the cybersecurity within a financial organization. And this is done in this step. So where we actually define some basic rules on, what exactly the top management, the senior management needs to be involved, which kind of decisions they make, who is in charge of what, and these kind of things. So this is a very important step that you actually have to do before you move on with some other steps. Okay, and then you have to perform, you have to define this risk assessment methodology, where you define how you're going to assess. Basically, this is risk management methodology. So where you define, how you're going to assess the risks, how you're going to treat the risks. And then as the next step, you go towards identifying all the assets, doing the risk assessment, doing the risk treatment. And what I didn't write here is also you have to identify all the processes and which assets, which ICT assets are connected to which critical and important processes within financial organizations. And then you go for the next step, which is called Digital Operational Resilience Strategy. And basically this is documents, if you're familiar with ISO 27001, this document is kind of similar to a risk treatment plan, where you define a detailed plan on how you intend to implement your cybersecurity. But it goes actually much wider, and it's also similar in, if you're familiar with ISO 22301, then you probably know about this business continuity strategy. And this digital operational resilience strategy also has, I would say, characteristics of this business continuity strategy according to 22301. So I would say from ISO perspective, this digital operational resilience strategy is a mixture between a risk treatment plan and business continuity strategy. Now, actually, let me show you in practice how this document could look like. So let me find this document and share. Okay, I'll bring it on a screen now. Okay, on the left-hand side, you see this, these headings, but let me scroll down here and show you just generally what kind of, let's say, element you could have here. You have some general part where you define how this digital operational resilience direction strategy actually has to support the business strategy, what are the risk tolerance levels, impact tolerance levels, and so on, information security objectives, and then what are the inputs for a resilience strategy. So basically the current situation, ICT infrastructure, risk management, business impact analysis. And then briefly you have to define how you manage incidents and crises, and then what is your recovery strategy for major incidents. So then you define, this sites and infrastructure strategy and so on and so forth. So basically this is, in general what you can, how you can structure this document. Let me just show you how this first part looks like. So direction, support for the strategy, and then basically you define that it's designed to align with the overall business objectives and so on. Then you have to define where these risk tolerance levels defined. In this case, this is in risk management methodology. And then you define the objectives, and then you have these inputs for the strategy, like current digital operational resilience situation, and so on and so forth. So basically, this is how you could approach this document, and how you can actually how you can basically write this kind of document. Okay, going back to my presentation, then you have to implement cybersecurity measures. Again, here you will have to write, if you don't already have this kind of documents, several documents related to cybersecurity. Let me show you, for example, access control policy. Let me find it. Okay, access control. So basically here you would define the main principles, user profiles, how you handle privilege management, how you regularly review access rights, change of statuses or termination of contract, technical implementation, so who is in charge of technically opening the access, how you deal with the secure authentication, these kind of things, and then of course you start writing. And as you can see here, there are references to DORA articles, but also to these to this CDR 2024-1774, and then as you can see several articles from this 1774. So all of these actually cover access control, and of course ISO 27001. And then you basically define user profiles and so on. Okay, now the next step is for you to define and implement business continuity measures. So again, from this part I can show you, for example, let me see, business continuity policy, business continuity plan. This is basically the I would say the structure that is taken from the business from ISO 22301. So plan content, assumptions, appointments, authorities, activation, communication, sites and transportation, order of recovery, interdependencies, interactions, required resources, preservation of damaged assets, these kind of things. So basically this is how you write actually this kind of business continuity plan. So the content, assumptions, appointments, authorities, and so on. So basically this is how this document can be structured. And then you have to start writing the ICT third-party risk management. So we typically would have at least one top-level policy and then a couple of implementation documents for that purpose. And this is something that this is something that you would need to have, because there is a big emphasis in DORA on these third parties, and also not only in DORA but also in these CDRs. As you've seen, there are a lot of them that require quite many of these specific things that you have to comply with. By the way, these templates that I was showing you, these come from our DORA documentation toolkit. We actually published this toolkit like 2 days ago. It's a very new product. And later on we will share with you the link if you're interested in this product. It basically covers all the documents that are needed for compliance with DORA. Okay, the next step is where am I? Sorry. The next step is regular cybersecurity training. So what you have to do, I would say, on a continuous basis is raise awareness and and train your employees. And it's actually funny because it requires not only your employees, but financial entities are actually obliged to also train the employees of ICT or of critical ICT suppliers. So it's also an obligation that that has to be done. We'll also share with you now the link to this article, which is called "How to Organize Training and Awareness According to DORA." So you'll be able to see the link now. Good. Now let's move on. The next step is to set up incident and threat reporting. There are pretty strict requirements for incident reporting, very similar to the ones in NIS2. And yeah, you simply have to, need to have these procedures for this kind of reporting. There is also this digital operational resilience testing. There is basically no similar concept in NIS2. There is no similar concept in 27001, even not in 22301. 22301 does have this requirements for testing and exercising of business continuity plan, but this digital operational resilience testing goes much further as a concept than I would say just regular testing of business continuity plans. I'll certainly have a separate webinar on this topic because it's a very interesting area. But for example, and basically this digital operational resilience testing covers lots of types of testing and I would say verifying that the systems work, and it also introduces this concept of threat-led penetration testing. So penetration testing actually becomes mandatory for certain types of financial organizations. Okay, the next step is this measurement, monitoring, review. So basically where you actually have to follow up on how your cybersecurity and resilience is performing. And then you have these internal audits, which are also mandatory, where you have to internally verify the compliance with all of your internal rules. Then the next step is this management review. Basically where the senior management has to be informed about all the relevant elements of compliance, and there is also, according to this CDR 1774, you also have to create this review report, which needs to be sent to the authority. So an output from this kind of a review needs to be formalized and also sent to the to the authorities. And finally, you have these follow-up actions, corrective measures. So you have to basically improve and correct everything that is not working fine. Okay, good. Now let me see some questions that came in. So Ramesh is asking role requirement of penetration test, ethical hacking test in DORA. So again, this is basically part of this digital operational resilience testing, and again, it's mandatory not for all financial organizations, but for some of them it is. So it's something that you have to, you can take a look at directly in the text of DORA that we shared with you. 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝘀𝗁 is asking if an EU financial institution has a branch outside of Europe, is it applicable? Basically, if let's say a bank is based in France and they have a subsidiary, let's say in Australia, then this Australian subsidiary does not need to be compliant with DORA. Okay, Jimmy is asking, is a financial entity in reference to the IT supplier to the regulated firm? I'm sorry, but I'm not sure if I understand your question. Melik is asking, do we need a special certificate to comply with DORA as lead auditor course, ISO 27001? Can you also advise and consult clients to get compliant with DORA? Of course, I mean, you can you can act as a consultant and help other financial organizations comply with DORA. There are courses out there which help you out for, let's say, building your knowledge and expertise on DORA and also some other regulations. We're now building this DORA lead implementer course, and I hope we will publish it in about 1 month time. Ramesh is asking when an organization will be audited to verify compliance with DORA requirements. Is it effective from 17th of January or after 6 months or a year? So basically, financial organizations have to be compliant already from the 17th of January. And when will they be audited? This depends on these authorities. To be honest, I'm not sure exactly when they will start with their audits, but they will certainly start already in 2025. Okay, yeah, many questions coming in. Let me go on with my presentation. Now, which ICT suppliers need to comply with DORA? Basically, the definition of this ICT supplier is any company providing digital and data services through ICT systems to financial entities, and basically this is specified in Article 3. So this means that if you are developing software, if you are providing cloud services, even if you are a telecom company providing telecommunication services to a financial entity, then you are considered as a ICT supplier. Okay. Now, all the ICT suppliers must comply with security standards. And DORA doesn't really say which are these security standards, but it will probably go in the direction of ISO 27001, because as you probably know, this is the biggest international cybersecurity standard. But it also might go actually in the direction of European Cybersecurity Certification Scheme, which will be developed which is being developed by ENISA, the European Cybersecurity Agency. We'll have to see, you know, what the authorities basically, you know, specify around these security standards. But, you know, my guess is, again, this will go towards 27001 and European Cybersecurity Certification Scheme. Further, second thing that all ICT service providers must comply with is these contractual obligations. So DORA specifies very clearly what are the contractual obligations that must be entered into agreements between a financial entity and their ICT supplier. And they have to be, of course, compliant with all of these. And as I mentioned already, Article 13.6 specifies that these ICT service providers must also raise awareness and training, and actually that financial organizations are in charge of performing this awareness and training. Yeah, so basically this is something that all of them have to comply. Now, what is very important to understand is that ICT suppliers do not need to comply with DORA, right? So you don't have to implement everything that is written in DORA. You have to comply with these specific things that are written with regards to ICT suppliers. Now, where it gets very interesting is that there are these, yeah, by the way, we'll share with you this link about the, with the article which speaks about which ICT suppliers need to be compliant with DORA. You'll see the link now in the chat window. So the previous slide, I was speaking about generally the rules that apply to all the ICT suppliers. Now, DORA distinguishes between, let's say, regular suppliers and critical ICT suppliers. Okay, definition of this critical ICT supplier is Article 31. I'm not going to spend time on this. You can actually read it yourself. And you can also read it in this article that we've shared the link now. Now, who actually determines which ICT supplier is critical? This is determined by these European supervisory authorities, or ESAs, according to criteria that are set in this CDR 1502. So the banks are not going to distinguish or define who are their critical suppliers. It is going to be defined by the European supervisory authorities. And this process will take some time, but I guess I'm not sure exactly about the deadlines, but I think that until the end of 2025, the ESAs will have to define who is a critical supplier. Now, for these critical suppliers, there are different rules, or better to say, additional rules. So on top of these requirements from the previous slide, these critical ICT suppliers will also have to comply with the following. They will actually need to be supervised by these lead overseer. So as you can see now, if you're a critical ICT supplier, you will have also a government body which actually supervises what you're doing. Similar to what you know, how the how the authorities are supervising financial organizations. So this is, you know, a new thing. So if you are, let's say, the most important cloud provider for a bank, or the most important software developer for a bank, you might be actually classified as a critical ICT supplier, and you will have this you know, the supervision from a government body. Then DORA specifies also these additional contractual obligations for these critical ICT suppliers. It also specifies how companies from outside of European Union are treated. So let's say that a bank in, let's say, Portugal has a supplier in Brazil, and this supplier is classified as critical. Then also DORA handles this kind of a case and specifies what needs to be done in these kind of cases. And also it defines fines and penalties for these critical suppliers. And it also defines that you have to pay the fee for being supervised, right? So unfortunately, these ICT critical suppliers will also pay fees for these government bodies to supervise them. So all of these things are defined for critical ICT suppliers. Good. Now, when you speak about mapping between 27001 and DORA, I wouldn't say 27001 is very useful here, but let me just elaborate on this. So DORA and its CDRs are much more prescriptive than NIS2. Also, in most of the articles, DORA has much more detailed requirements than ISO 27001. And further, DORA does not really mention ISO 27001 as any kind of an obligation, right? So basically, DORA is much, I would say, heavier, much more detailed than 27001. So, from the first glance, it's not, I would say, very useful for DORA, at least not on this detailed level. However, you can actually take a more high-level view of ISO 27001 and of DORA, and there you actually might find some utility from 27001 towards DORA, and let me explain you by what I mean here. So as you can see, as you probably know, if you're dealing with ISO 27001, there is this plan, do, check, and act cycle, right? In the planning phase, you're basically defining what you want to achieve. In the do phase, you're implementing these things. In check phase, you are monitoring, measuring if you are achieving this, and then in do phase, in the act phase, you are improving everything that you need to improve. And here in this table, you actually have a breakdown of all the clauses that go for plan, do, check, and act, but you also have a map, high-level map towards DORA, what actually belongs to the plan, do, check, and act phases. And you can actually use, when you use this kind of a philosophy of plan, do, check, and act, you can actually use ISO 27001 to kind of govern, to set up your system of managing cybersecurity in the DORA context. When you know this when you know this plan, do, check, and act cycle, and when you have this in mind, then you can actually apply this plan, do, check, and act cycle for DORA as well, and then you will find it easier to actually deal with such a very complex regulation. So again, for details, ISO 27001 is not very useful, but for, I would say, overall concept of, let's say, managing cybersecurity, it actually might be quite useful. And actually this reflects later on in the, for example, implementation steps. If you compare the implementation steps that I've shown you in this presentation with, let's say, ISO 27000 implementation steps, you will see that these implementation steps are rather similar. Why? Because, again, they follow the same logic of PDCA. We'll, by the way, share with you now an article about ISO 27001 implementation steps, just that you can actually compare them. Okay, so you will see this link in the chat now. Good. Now let's move on to the next slide about the challenges. I received lots of your emails with challenges that you have around DORA, and I kind of tried to select the most representative ones and the most common ones, and I'll go now through these challenges and give you some tips on how to address them. So one challenge was we have multiple frameworks we adhere to: 27001, 9001, TISAX, and DORA, and then basically the rest of the sentence meant that there is a challenge also to go for DORA. Now, from these couple of first frameworks that I see here, this is probably not a financial organization. This is probably IT supplier of a financial organization. And again, IT suppliers do not need to comply with DORA. They have to comply most probably with 27001. So I wouldn't say that you have to go much further than what you have as part of 27001. Another challenge was how businesses outside of EU have to handle DORA regulation. Again, financial organizations outside of EU do not have to comply. Only their, let's say, if they have their business units within European Union, their subsidiaries, then these subsidiaries would need to comply. So basically only the critical ICT suppliers based outside of European Union would have to, let's say, take some additional measures to make sure that they are compliant, not with DORA, but with the contractual obligations set in the agreements with their buyer from Europe. Another greatest challenge is managing the complexity of compliance, especially regarding third-party risk management, strict incident reporting, resource allocation, etc. So yes, I mean, if you have to do everything that is written in DORA, then obviously you have a big, I wouldn't say a problem, but certainly a big challenge. And okay, there are a couple of ways to do it. One way would be simply to hire additional people to comply with DORA. A second approach would be to hire a consultant to do this on, I would say, a temporary basis. And the third approach would be simply to use tools like this toolkit of ours, where you actually can get all the know-how, all the documents that you need for this kind of compliance. So there are different approaches that you can take to let's say, decrease this, I would say, burden of compliance with such a complex regulation. Okay, the next challenge was identifying what policies and procedures we need. So if you remember, I was showing you during the presentation this article which is called List of Documents Needed for DORA. And we already shared the link with you for this particular article. There you actually have each and every requirement of DORA and also the suggested document that you can use for compliance. Okay, also a challenge, only entering into agreements with ICT service providers that meet adequate security standards. So again, these adequate security standards are still not prescribed, but if you have a supplier that is certified against ISO 27001, you certainly cannot go wrong, right? Because it's the biggest cybersecurity standard accepted, by the ISO organization. So it's something that again you can't go wrong with accepting this kind of a supplier. Okay, there is another link that we'll share with you, and this is this free download. It's a white paper. It's a big guide to DORA regulation, and we'll send a link now to you. You can also download this and basically see lots of these things that I mentioned today. They are kind of summarized in this PDF that you can download. Good. Now let me move on to the next slide, or to conclusion. So I would say, if you're planning this whole compliance thing properly, then you can implement DORA, I would say, more smoothly than you expected. And yeah, for that purpose, of course, you can use a DORA documentation toolkit from Advisera, and we'll share now the link to this DORA toolkit now. And by the way, when you click this link, you will notice that you will see all the documents, the previews. You will see that you can click the preview of each and every document that is a part of this DORA toolkit, but you can also sign up for a free trial. So when you actually go into this free trial, you will use that, you will actually be able to log into this software that generates these documents, and you will be able to download the free demo of each document. So you can go for this free trial and see for yourself how this works. Okay, so here's the link. We'll also share a link with you to for a meeting with our toolkit experts. So if you want someone from our team to show you how this looks like, show you all the full documents, how they look like, you can schedule a call with our colleague, and he will show you everything that you're interested in. So you can also use this link in the chat window now. Good. Now, yeah, let's go for the Q&A. Yeah, before I'll start answering, of course, your remaining questions now, and feel free to ask any other questions through the chat window, and I'll be glad to answer them. And before I start answering your questions, just a couple of notes. Feel free to reach out to me directly and ask any question. And here's my email, and so you can contact me directly. So just let me show this on the screen. But you can also, of course, go for, so we'll send you now through the chat window my email address, and then you can, of course, contact and ask any questions. Second thing is you can follow me on my LinkedIn profile, on my YouTube profile. And what you'll notice is that on my LinkedIn profile, I publish very often, news from this compliance world, and also links from Advisera's websites regarding DORA, but also on 27001, NIS2, and so on. So if you want to kind of keep in touch, if you want to keep in touch with all the news, you can follow me on LinkedIn. Also, you can follow me on my YouTube profile. I publish lots of videos on ISO 27001, on NIS2, but in a week or two I'll start publishing some videos about DORA. So if you prefer this video format, you can also visit my two of these profiles. Another announcement here. So my next webinar will be on how to sell ISO consulting services. And in this webinar next week, next Wednesday, I'll explain which methods and channels you can actually use for that purpose. And here you can actually see the upcoming webinars. So here's the here are the links. Actually here you can see these links on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and you can sign up for these webinars as well. Okay, now let's go through the questions. Let me see which questions I received. Just let me scroll through all of these. Okay, Aaron was asking what is the frequency of sending the management review output to authorities, UK? So DORA is not applicable in UK. It's only applicable in the European Union. So there is no obligation to send anything to UK authorities. From this, when it comes to management review output, it's I'm not sure. I think it's once a year. So basically, you have to do it at least one. You have to do this review at least once a year, and then send this report to the authorities within the European Union. Okay, very well. Now let's see some other questions that are coming in. So Emmanuel is asking, do you have a document mapping DORA controls to ISO 27001? So basically this is what I've shown in the presentation. Barbara is asking, in the risk assessment methodology, can we use ISO 27001 templates in documents? Mainly yes. Although there are some requirements from DORA which are not really mentioned for example, in our ISO 27001 toolkit. We also have the toolkit for ISO 27001, but it's not fully compliant with DORA. So when we made this DORA toolkit, we actually had to, I would say, adapt it and enlarge these documents to make it fully compliant with DORA. Tal is asking, it sure sounds like 27001, so why do we need DORA? So again, DORA is much more detailed than 27001. This is first thing. Second, DORA is a regulation, so financial organizations must comply with DORA. If you're an ICT supplier, you should not comply with DORA. This is not something that you have to comply with. You have to comply with usually some security standard, and you have to comply with these contractual requirements from your with your buyer, from with your financial institution. Daniel is asking, if you're ISO 27000 compliant, how big is the step to be DORA compliant? Looks like there is a lot of similar compliance steps. I would say there is a pretty big step. So again, DORA is much more detailed than 27001. And it's if you have 27001, maybe you're 50% done, right? You have to do at least additional 50%. Whereas if you ask me about NIS2, NIS2 is much more closer to 27001. So I would say if you are compliant with 27001, this would be 80%, of NIS2. Andrew is asking, is there a mapping with ISO 20000? No, we still didn't make this kind of a mapping. Paul is asking, DORA documentation, is it formalized in format? So I'm not sure if you're asking about our documentation toolkit. So our documentation toolkit is basically defined in, these are the Word and Excel templates, and they're, I would say, carefully written so that they are compliant with each and every requirement from DORA, but also from all these CDRs and CIRs. Chris is asking, does the EU entity of a cryptocurrency wallet provider such as Bitcoin wallet needs to comply with DORA? You have to check this in the list of all the entities that need to comply, but I think that these entities which provide these exchange services for cryptocurrencies, I think they do also have to be compliant. Jimmy is asking, is the definition of financial entity in reference to the IT supplier to the regulated firm in the context of micro enterprises? I'm not sure if I understand this, but basically the DORA specifies exactly, you know, that all the IT suppliers have to be considered as suppliers, and then they have to be compliant with these 3 bullets, if you remember. And then if you are a critical IT supplier, then they have to comply with these additional requirements. Robert is asking, should there be a central database showing which ICT suppliers are fulfilling it? There is an approach in Austria, Europe. Yes, so I'm not sure if you're asking about the internal for financial entities or some general on the European level. So basically each and every entity have to develop their own register of all the IT suppliers that they're using. So this is one of the requirements in DORA. There is no requirement to have some kind of a central database on the European level. Rich is asking, can you please talk a little bit about the relationship and/or overlap with SOC 2? I'm not familiar enough with SOC 2 to discuss this, but in any case, SOC 2 is, you know, US local standard. It's not intended for, let's say, international use. It's not intended for financial organizations. So I wouldn't say it's a very good way. I mean, it's not something that you would basically need to compare to DORA. Andrew is asking, is it applicable to NGOs, non-profit organizations operating in financial regulation? Well, it doesn't matter, you know, if you're an NGO or non-profit. If you're a financial entity, you're a financial entity, and this is it. If you're a bank, you're a bank. If you're, I don't know, insurance company, then you're an insurance company. You have to comply with DORA. Barbara is asking, have credit collection agencies to comply with DORA as they are suppliers of financial entities? Okay, suppliers, so again, suppliers do not need to comply with DORA, full stop, okay? Suppliers have to be compliant with a cybersecurity standard like 27001, and suppliers have to be compliant with the security requirements that they have signed in an agreement with their buyer, the financial entity. This is what they have to be compliant, not with the DORA regulation, only with these things that I mentioned. Wendy is asking, does DORA give customers the right to audit entities that must comply? You mean, if the question here is, you know, if I have a savings account in a particular bank, can I audit this bank? No. If I'm a company that has, let's say, a loan in a bank, or that you know, you have a deposit in this bank, can I, you know, audit this bank? No. So basically, it's the bank customers cannot, you know, audit their supply. I mean, their financial entities. So no, it's not. This is not something that DORA prescribes. Yaroslav is asking, if DORA is fully effective in 2 days, isn't it somehow late to start with these 18 steps? In which stage we should be right now, or at the end of this week out of these 18 steps? So you basically should be finished. So, and I agree with you, you know, most, it should be, I would say, prudent from financial entities to be compliant with all of these 18 steps. But to be honest, you know, from, I would say, informal information that we got, many of these organizations are still not fully compliant, and they particularly struggle with documentation. And this is why we published also this toolkit to help them out. David is asking, is it correct to say that authorities decide who is a critical ICT supplier, not the organization that needs to be compliant with DORA? This is true, yes. So the authorities are the ones to decide. Barbara is asking, as in Italy, our IT company has to comply with NIS2. Could we use this obligation in order to give us assurance to our financial customers? So compliance with NIS2 does not give you directly, I would say, assurance, because this is not a standard. So if we look this directly from NIS2, from the DORA perspective, you have to be compliant with a standard. And then in this case, this would be ISO 27001. Or again, some other standard which is relevant for, let's say, financial industry. Rich is asking, when you mentioned internal audit required, does that mean you need an independent internal audit department or self-assessment sufficient in this context? So in most cases, financial organizations have a separate regulations when it comes to internal audit. But looking purely from the DORA perspective, DORA also specifies that this internal audit function has to be independent and that there is no conflict of interest. So you can't really, you know, tell one of your IT employees to do the internal audit. No way. I mean, it's going to be conflict of interest, so you can't do this. So ideally, you would have, if you are a large or institution, you would have a separate internal audit department. If you're a small institution, you can actually use one of your employees that is not in the conflict of interest, and then put this person in charge for doing the internal audit. Emanuele is asking, what is the certification body for DORA? There is no certification body because DORA is not a standard. DORA is a regulation, and there are these European supervisory authorities, so government bodies which will basically audit financial organizations to make sure that they are compliant. 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝘀𝗁 is asking, is there a mapping between NIS2 and DORA? Right now not, but this is certainly a good idea for us to develop something like this. Ramesh is saying, thanks, it was a great presentation discussion. Okay, thank you, Ramesh. And yeah, the last question today, and then we'll have to end the webinar since it's already past time. So a question from Sinisha: is DORA mandatory for social platform which is collecting anonymously user data with user consent and shares it with entities which are not financial and banking? This is in regards to Article 2 scope, data reporting service providers. So I would believe that these data reporting service providers from Article 2 are only for basically for specifically for financial organizations, for example, companies that provide, let's say, credit history, these kind of things. But if you're not, let's say, in this financial world, if you are collecting different types of information, then I wouldn't say that this is something that you would have to be compliant with. Okay, great. So I think I covered, if not all, then a majority of your questions. So just a couple of words before we finish. So as I mentioned, this 1-hour webinar was too short to go into details like each and every requirement, you know, all the controls, all the documents. And for that purpose, we will organize other webinars. Now, regarding this PDF presentation deck, we'll publish this presentation deck together with all the links from today's webinar on the same page, on the same LinkedIn page, on the same YouTube page where you joined this webinar. So basically just wait for maybe 10 minutes, refresh the page, and you will see these links come up in the comments. And you'll also see this link for the download of this presentation deck. If you joined through Zoom, and then you will receive actually an email from Advisera where you will see also the link to download this presentation deck. Finally, we'll also send you the link to our short survey. So it's really short, only 3 questions. So I would really appreciate if you have time to open it and give me your feedback. And this would be all. Thank you very much for your participation, and I hope you have enjoyed this webinar. Have a nice day.